How are we all this week? I'm going to an assembly this week, and this week it's going to be about time. It's something that interests me greatly, and it makes me think about the stories that I used to read when I was younger. One of my favourite books was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. In fact, I love the whole of the Narnia Chronicles, and as you can see here, somebody very kindly a couple of years ago bought me a beautiful set of the books, all in hardback, and I have actually been going through and reading them during lockdown. So why did I like The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe? Well, I think it was because Lucy and her brothers and sister went into the wardrobe, had all these amazing adventures, such exciting things happening to them. They came out of the wardrobe and no time had passed since they went into the wardrobe. So they could go off and have all these amazing adventures and come back home knowing that when they got back home, nothing had changed and everything was just as it should be and just as they had left it. And as if by magic, the dog is back. And of course, all through the Chronicles of Narnia, there was all sorts of magic. There were rings that took you to other worlds, and if you wore a yellow ring, you went to the other world and you came back home with a green ring. And one of my favourite moments is in the third book, which is Prince Caspian, when the four children go back to the land of Narnia a couple of years in real time after they first went there, and go back to the castle where they'd reigned as kings and queens. When they come back to the castle, they realise that hundreds and hundreds of years have passed and the castle is just a ruin. It's completely changed. I want to read you the moment where they realise that this is actually what has happened. For now all knew that it was indeed the ancient treasure chamber of Caer Paravel, the castle where they had once reigned as kings and queens of Narnia. There was a kind of path up the middle, and along each side at intervals stood rich suits of armour, knights guarding the treasures. In between the suits of armour on each side of the path were shelves covered with precious things, necklaces and arm rings and finger rings, golden bowls and dishes, long tusks of ivory, brooches and coronets and chains of gold, and heaps of unset stones lying piled anyhow as if they were marbles or potatoes. Under the shelves stood great chests of oak, strengthened with iron bars and heavily padlocked. And as it was bitterly cold, they could hear themselves breathing, and the treasures were so covered with dust that unless they had realised where they were and remembered most of the things, they would hardly have known they were in the treasure chest of the castle. There was something sad and a little frightening about the place, because it all seemed so forsaken and long ago. That was why nobody said anything for at least a minute. Then, of course, they began walking about and picking things up to look at. It was like meeting very old friends. If you had been there, you would have heard them saying things like, "Oh look, our coronation ring, remember wearing this? Why, this is the little brooch we all thought I'd lost. Do you remember the dwarf making that for me? Do you remember drinking out of that goblet? Do you remember? Do you remember?" Do you remember? Because I think that is a little bit like what is happening for me now at school. I go into school and the corridors are empty and the classrooms are empty and there's a strange echo about the place. But everything is the same. It's not quite like Narnia where you go back and things have changed. But it leads me on to the question about what's going to happen when you all do come back to school. Will it be the same? Will it be the school that you left in March? And if it isn't, what will have changed? Well, the buildings will be the same and the staff will be the same, with a few new staff, because we always have new staff in September. But the school itself will have changed quite significantly, sometimes really subtly and sometimes very clearly. And it's these changes that I want to talk to you about. Let's think about our learning, for example. Now, some of you are working from home and doing that really well. Some of you are doing all of it, some of you are doing half of it, and some of you haven't been able to do much of it at all. So when you come back in September, you're not all going to be exactly the same as you were when you left. Some of you are going to need some help to catch up, and some of you are going to be racing ahead and wanting to know what the next new piece of learning is going to be. So the first thing that we have got to do when you come back in September is prepare for all the different stages of your learning that you are inevitably going to be at. What we do know, it won't be like you've just been away on a long holiday, because some of you have continued to work. In fact, most of you have continued to work really hard in the gap. There will be some things which will have changed, and quite possibly might never change back. We won't be able to walk close to each other. We will inevitably have to social distance, and there will be certain things that we're going to have to change. What will assemblies look like? How will we walk along a narrow corridor when we've got other people coming towards us? So what we are going to have to do is change some of our routines. We're going to have to think about how some of our behaviour will change, and there will inevitably be new rules and new ways of behaving. For example, I was listening to a news report the other day, and someone was saying that if you intentionally coughed on another person, you could actually be breaking the law because of the danger that you're putting that person in. So how are we going to manage that at school? But there will be some things that I can promise you won't have changed. Our desire for you to learn, our desire for you to get the best possible education so that you can aspire to great things, our desire for you to work hard and us to help you work hard and get all of those grades and exam results that you deserve. The way we care about you, the way we listen to you and the way we understand you, that won't have changed, and we will still be here as a staff body to look after your education and or your own pastoral needs. That won't have changed. And believe it or not, some things will have changed for the better. Some things will be even better than they were before. I know how much you are all enjoying your live learning with your teachers, and I actually know how much your teachers are enjoying delivering those live lessons. Just think what we can do with that in the future. Imagine if a teacher has to go on a course for a day, knows they're going on a course, they could set up live lessons for you so that you go to the computer room and have a live lesson instead of having to sit in the classroom and do a worksheet. Some of your homework, some of your independent learning could be live lessons. And how exciting all the different software packages that we're getting our heads around at the moment that we can use to improve your learning and to make sure that you get the best of everything. Mrs. Morehouse was only telling me the other day how she had this great lesson where she took her students round a university, round a museum, and then off into a Tudor forest to go hunting with Henry VIII. All of that is possible now, and we've got to make the most of those opportunities and really move forward with what we can do with real-time learning. So yes, we'll be back in the classroom in some way, but we've got all of these great things which we've discovered about being in lockdown, which we can use next academic year. I think that's really exciting. So I just want to reassure you and let you know that for those of you who are saying, what will school look like when I come back in September? Will school still be the same? What will my lessons look like? Will I get my options? Will I be in year 10? Will I take exams next year? Some of those questions we don't know the answers to, but we do know that we are going to be back in school, and we will be planning for you, and we will be making sure you get the best available education as soon as you are back. We're very excited about having you back, and right now myself and all the staff are starting to plan what school will look like when you return. It's exciting, it's frightening, but it's inspiring all at the same time. Please don't worry, when you come back to school, things might have changed a little bit when you jump out of that wardrobe and back into the corridor of the dusty old house, but most of it will be what you want it to be and what you need it to be. can I also recommend that if you haven't already read the Chronicles of Narnia, that you do. A great read. Have a good week. I shall speak to you next week.